Welcome, America. How are you? This is a show called The Young Turks. I'm Cenk Uygur. She's Anna Kasparian, otherwise known as the Salt Dragon, otherwise known as AK-47, a little uncomfortable these days, otherwise known as Casper the Friendly Host. That's better, that's better. Okay, friendly. Casper the Salty Host.
I'm friendly to those who deserve it.
Yeah, to those who deserve it, which is a tiny group of people. True, as you see in the news. As you see every day in the news, okay? So guys, are we the show that kicks ass? I guess. Are we the show that sometimes
you sound like you're high.
I know, I guess. Sometimes we have fun with the news. I guess. All right, this is both of those things I'm sure will happen as they do every day, as you all know. So let's get started, okay?
Let's get started. Let's begin with the bane of our existence, evangelical Christians. Right-wing evangelical activist Peggy Nienaber was caught on tape bragging about offering prayer services and executing prayer services for conservative Supreme Court justices, which is a massive conflict of interest. Now, she got caught admitting this on tape while speaking at a protest event. In fact, it wasn't even a protest event. It was a victory party in front of the Supreme Court to celebrate the reversal of Roe, meaning the stripping of reproductive rights from women. And here is what she admitted while someone was recording her. Let's watch.
It's not really a church, we're a ministry center for the justices.
Wow, what does that mean? You pray with the justices?
Yes, we're the only people that do that.
Oh my gosh, where are you guys from?
Here, I work right here on Capitol Hill.
And you actually pray with the Supreme Court justices?
I do.
That's amazing.
I card it's somewhere in my.
And the Supreme Court justices will pray with you, like they're cool about it, or did they have to?
No, they will pray with us. Those that like us to pray with them. Some of them don't.
I might want to interview you. Would you ever do an interview?
Not on that.
Okay.
Because that's totally off the record.
Okay, so let's get a few things clear here, okay? In the tape, if you had trouble hearing what she was saying, she talks about how she's praying with the Supreme Court justices. She makes clear that this conversation is off the record. Let me also say, if you say that something is off the record, you need acceptance of that from the person you're talking to, the reporter or the journalist you're talking to. You can't just simply say all of these controversial things or incriminating things and then after the fact say off the record. It doesn't work that way. You need to get the agreement before you make the statements, and she didn't do that clearly. So since it's not really off the record, it was released to the public, and now we know that an evangelical activist has admitted that they've been praying with Supreme Court justices. I do the air quotes because praying is really code word for colluding, strategizing, because this is an organization that has represented the right wing in multiple lawsuits that have made their way to the Supreme Court and then later stripped women of their reproductive rights. For instance, she is Liberty Counsel's executive director of DC ministry. And they've been working on, essentially any right-wing group that's bringing a social issue to the Supreme Court. They've been representing that right-wing group, right? So a few more things. She mentions in that video, quote, "We're the only people who do that," meaning we're the only ones who pray with the Supreme Court justices. No one else does it because it's a massive conflict of interest. The ministry's umbrella organization, Liberty Counsel, frequently brings lawsuits before the Supreme Court. In fact, the conservative majority in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, which ended nearly 50 years of federal abortion rights, cited an amicus brief authored by Liberty Counsel in its ruling. And we have more details on this, but Cenk, why don't you jump in?
Okay, first, real quick on the issue that's not that important. She says off the record at the end, it's a live stream, too late.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Right, and so it's just not how it works. Okay, so now the important stuff. So look guys, this is number one, if you've got a case in front of the Supreme Court, you praying with them is, I mean, it's absurd, right?
Praying.
Like, so, but think about it. So number one, if everybody was praying together, I would still be opposed to it, but at least, okay, you got the plaintiffs, the defendants, everybody's here, and we're just doing a respectful prayer. That's not what this is. This is, we're praying in secret with only one side, and the issue is about religion, okay? So, gee, I wonder which side they're gonna rule with, and of course they did. They overwhelmingly ruled with the side that they pray with, but more importantly than even that, which is already, that's disqualifying. There's no way they should rule on that case after they are basically, working together with one side of the case. But there's no rules left at the Supreme Court. It's just totally turned into a ridiculous institution. But the most important part is the guy who founded this group in the first place, a guy named Robb Schenck. At the time, it was called Faith in Action. So first, let me read you graphic 6, which tells you the history of this, and then I'm going to tell you why this is so important from his own words, okay? They explain in the Rolling Stone piece, but Robb Schenck, the founder of the ministry, who surrendered his operations to the Liberty Council in 2018, tells Rolling Stone that he hosted prayer sessions with conservative justices in their chambers from the late 1990s through when he left the group in the mid-2010s. So the group is now denying that this happens. I don't believe them. Their own founder says, yeah, we did it for decades and decades. By the way, why did Schenck leave? So because Schenck realized, oh my God, we're actually doing the same exact thing that evangelical Christians did in Germany in the 1930s. And we're radicalizing these Republicans into some form of Christian nationalism. And so he actually stopped doing it. And it's an amazing story.
Wow, an evangelical person with a conscience?
Yeah.
That's really weird. Wow.
No, but it is.
And
that's
shocking,
why,
really.
And that's why, of course, he's been ostracized, right?
It turns out that your name doppelganger has some redeeming qualities.
Right? Listen, Shank.
Literally, his
as
name
a lot
is
of
Shank.
people would call me. Anyway, so look, he says one thing that's super important, guys. He said, look, prayer is a form of influence. We lead the prayers, and the prayers are considered, of course, sacred. So what you say in the prayers are not in dispute, right? They have the guise of the authority of God Himself. So, and these are really religious justices. So he didn't use the word brainwashing, but he said basically the prayer is a political statement to influence them, and not just influence them normally, but as if God Himself is influencing them.
Yep.
And look, for rational people, you think, well, that's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
It's a form of manipulation.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the best word to describe it.
Yes,
yeah.
That's exactly right. And you might think, well, I mean, why would they be influenced by this grando telling them he speaks for God? No, they are. That's how a lot of religious zealots believe that with 100% certainty. So the die was cast. So what you're seeing on tape there is someone accidentally admitting that they actually secretly manipulate the Supreme Court to be even more religious and rule against our secular constitution.
Exactly, and I want to also just give you more specificity in regard to what they're manipulating these justices for through the use of religion. Nienaber intended her comments broadcast on YouTube, again, that was a live stream, to be totally off the record, she says in the clip. Now, why? That's likely because such an arrangement represents a problem for the Orlando-based Liberty Council, which not only weighed in on the Dobbs case, which I mentioned earlier as a friend of the court, but also litigated and won a 9-0 Supreme Court victory this May in a case centered on the public display of a religious flag. And so again, it's not just the issue pertaining to women's reproductive rights. It's any issue where Christian nationalists want to lord their, political power, their religion over the rest of our lives, right? The rest of us in the country. And it is honestly a disaster, but at the same time, while this might be a huge story, it might be a huge conflict of interest. I mean, we're talking about it on the show, it's the top of the rundown. I mean, you also have Clarence Thomas, a Supreme Court justice whose wife was working alongside former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Trump's campaign lawyer John Eastman, and all this other insanity in an effort to overturn the results of the 2020 election in favor of Donald Trump. right? I mention that because Clarence Thomas should obviously recuse himself from any case involving the 2020 election. He has refused to do so. There has been absolutely no consequences, and the individuals who would threaten him with consequences is the Democratic Party, which clearly has no interest in doing a damn thing about anything that's happening in the country right now.
Yeah, look, guys, now some will find this controversial, but I'm not religious. I'm just trying to give you my perspective, okay? And this perspective are now a lot of Americans. So when we hear fundamentalist religious folks saying, hey, it's okay, we pray together and then God told us that we should control your bodies and take away your freedom. We hear Zeus and Athena got together with Odin and decided that Loki should control your bodies. And that sounds totally nuts to us. And so I know I'm not allowed to say that because religious folks are very, very, very sensitive, right? Like you guys, by the way.
I don't care about their sensitivity at all right now, not even a little bit, okay? So be sensitive, yes, cry all you want. You're trying to control other people's lives and bodies, which will have a lasting impact on the rest of their future. Like, I'm not interested in your sensitivity, sorry. Continue.
Yeah, so by the way, of course, and religious folks are completely different. There's some wonderful religious people, and then there's the zealots and the fundamentalists. But those fundamentalists would say, oh yeah, but we think you're in league with Satan and we believe you'll burn in hell in eternity.
Awesome, ditto.
Yeah, wait, why is that not offensive? That sounds like way more offensive, doesn't it? Okay, but they say it like with regularity, like it's no big deal. But the point here is, guys, I'm deeply disturbed that we live in a country where folks who believe in Loki talking to them and Venus and whoever, whatever other goddess, the sun goddess, talking to them and whispering in their ear. Forget whether God exists, forget spirituality. The fact that they think it talks to them and tells them what to do, and that leads to them taking our freedom away, and there's nothing we could do about it. That is a very disturbing reality. And in the past, it was a minority in America. This is the first secular country in the world. It's enshrined in our Constitution. But now, the folks who believe in invisible people are about to win. And they have won now, and they do control our bodies.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on from one group of right-wing zealots to a specific right-wing zealot who's trying to provide cover for Republicans who usually abandon kids as soon as they're born. Marco Rubio. A specific right-wing zealot who's trying to provide cover for Republicans who usually abandon kids as soon as they're born. Marco Rubio. Following the Supreme Court's reversal of women's reproductive rights, Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida, decided to jump in to provide cover for Republicans who have a very clear record in abandoning children the second they're born. We do not have any support system in the United States for parents, for families, and so he decided to put out hogwash in the form of legislation that's allegedly supposed to help parents when they have children. But if you dig a little bit, you notice that it's anything but a helpful bill. Now, he refers to it as his pro-family framework, okay? It's supposed to be a social spending bill, a social spending program that provides some help to new parents. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't. Now, after Roe, I want to give you some of these headlines to show you that right-wingers are doing their best to try to provide the cover, right? After Roe, the real pro-life work begins.
Why did it wait till after Roe?
Yeah, it's because they were never serious. Never serious about it. That's from the Midland Daily News. Michael Reagan is the one who wrote that piece. The pro-life movement can't stop at the unborn, and that's a Washington Post opinion piece. And then we've got Molly Smith over at National Review, another right-wing publication. Pro-lifers' work in Ohio is just beginning. And so it, again, pretends as if they're gonna provide some help for women who are now going to be forced to go through pregnancy, forced to go through childbirth, because the state, under the direction of religious zealots, has decided to force them to do so, okay? Huge government intervention here. Now, what is Rubio offering in his so-called pro-family framework? Okay, so there are two main provisions to this framework, a child tax credit and a parental leave program. Interesting, okay, let's start with the child tax credit. Rubio's child tax credit is based on family income, meaning that the more money you earn, the more child tax credit benefits you receive up to a certain point. Because of this phase-in, new parents earning less than $29,412 per year are not eligible for the full, get a load of this, for the full, look, so generous, $4,500 benefit. And new parents with no earnings are eligible for absolutely nothing.
Absurd.
This is who they are, folks. This is what the Republican Party is. This is what the Republican Party has been. This is nothing more than a cutesy little PR stunt by Marco Rubio. Doesn't care about families, doesn't care about our fellow Americans and making sure that children grow up happy, healthy, well-fed, well-sheltered, doesn't care about any of that. All they've ever cared about is controlling our lives, controlling our bodies, telling us what we can do with our bodies, telling us what kind of sex we're allowed to have behind closed doors with our loved one. It's disgusting, but there's more. So again, like, think about what the reversal of Roe means for women already living in poverty. They're the ones who will be impacted by this the most because they don't have the resources necessary to travel out of state, to go to a place like California, for instance, to get abortion access. Poor women are gonna be impacted by this the most. And to add insult to injury, Marco Rubio is saying, hey, I got a plan to help women except for the poorest ones. So abortion is most prevalent among young women with very low or no earnings, including many women who are still getting their education. Yep. Okay, but they don't qualify for this. They're not going to get the child tax credit. Now, if you thought that policy was bad, wait until you hear about Rubio's parental leave program. Before I get to it though, Cenk, thoughts?
Yeah, so look, he's a caricature of the Republican politician. So first of all, he's a boy. We've talked about this many times. And luckily the Republican voters aren't buying him either. They'll reelect him as senator for the rest of the time because he's got so much money and he's a Republican. But when he ran for president, he was run out of town because he's an obviously super fake politician that's only in it for the rich. But that is why mainstream media loves this guy. Every reporter, every pundit, you might not remember, but you can go back and look at the tapes in 2015 and 2016 and say, oh, it's a Marco Rubio. If it's not Jeb Bush, it's Marco Rubio. It's definitely not going to be Donald Trump. Why do they love him? That's why I'm bringing it up here. They love him because he robs you and gives to the rich. I mean, here he's being brazen, saying, oh, I'm doing a pro-life agenda, in case you need an abortion, but you're not going to get one now because we took your rights away. I'm going to provide for you, but just kidding. The people who would get the most likely to get the abortion are young and poor. I'm not going to give it to you. This is actually a giveaway to the rich, and in fact, the richer you are, the more you get in this.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a joke. It's a joke.
It is a joke.
So, I mean, great job here in peoplespolicyproject.org for pointing this out. But mainstream media, are you ever going to see this? Are the voters in Florida ever going to know he was trying to rob the poor to give to because it's our taxes. The poor pay into it as a percentage of their income, oftentimes more.
Yes.
Right? He's robbing the poor and most importantly the middle class to pay the rich.
So let me jump in and give Matt Bruenig a lot of credit. He's the one who did the analysis. He does great analysis when it comes to this particular issue over at the People's Policy Project. And to your point, Cenk, about the corporate press, not only does the corporate press avoid these types of stories or this kind of in-depth analysis, they actively despise the Bruenigs. Like any chance they get, they go after the Bruenigs, which I think tells you everything you need to know about where their priorities lie. But
because progressive reporters and progressive politicians embarrass the establishment because we're not the right wing. We're actually right. We show facts. We show you the actual language of the bill. You could look it up. It's easy to dismiss the right wing, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, Jewish space lasers, etc. When we show them real facts and show them that they're liars and they lie on behalf of the rich, they go, oh, no, not the Bruenigs, not the Young Turks, no, wait, no, not Bernie, no. That is the biggest threat to them. because it humiliates them for the corporate shills that they are.
Okay, now I got to get to the parental leave provision, because this is, you'll get parental leave under Marco Rubio's plan, but only if you're willing to borrow from yourself, including borrowing from your Social Security benefits, which are already, like, in the grand scheme of things, pretty meager and should be a lot more robust. But nonetheless, let me give you the details. So Rubio's parental leave program provides 3 months of leave benefits for new parents, with the catch that any parent that claims them will have to undergo a reduction in their Social Security old age benefits to offset what they receive for parental leave. So understand what's happening here, okay? Remember, Marco Rubio would never want to upset our corporate overlords, right? His corporate donors, because parental leave would require your employer, right? The right kind of parental leave would require your employer to provide that benefit, either through paying more in the payroll tax, or just providing that benefit. Maybe there's a mandatory benefit that needs to be provided by these companies. That is not what he's doing here. He's essentially telling you, you could totally take like 3 months off, absolutely. You're just gonna borrow from yourself to do it, meaning, okay, let me give you those details. So specifically, the Rubio bill states that a parental leave beneficiary will, at retirement, be required to choose between paying those benefits back by having their Social Security check docked for 60 months.
60 months.
Or paying those benefits back by having every Social Security check docked until they die.
Unbelievable.
For 3 months of parental leave.
3 months of parental leave, and then you lose 5 years of retirement benefits. So, well, I gotta give it to Rubio for being creative. First one was a standard trick, robbing the poor and the middle class to pay the rich. This is robbing a future you to pay you now.
Yeah.
Okay. So no, that's not a good deal. So now the important part, guys, is, well, is that the only option, right? No, there are many other options. All other developed nations do paid family leave, and by the way, it doesn't cost that much. We could do an increase in payroll tax. Oh, that sounds scary. You know how much you would need? 0.1% increase in payroll tax, because paid family leave is just for 3 months and it only affects a small group of people. It doesn't cost that much, but no, never good enough. We're never gonna take a penny out of the rich, okay? No, we're gonna rob you of 5 years of retirement if you dare have a child. This is his pro-life policy. Okay, so now, guys, the reason I focus on the media so much is because they're the refs. So why is he even doing this? Republicans are not in favor of child tax credit or paid family leave, because those two are super popular programs. So he wants to have the appearance of doing the popular programs without actually doing them. And that would be fine, and we would laugh him out of town if the press were actually fair. And they pointed out, oh, look at this fool that thinks he's gonna trick you by robbing you, and the press actually did their job and told you what's in the bill. But the press will never do that. Instead, they will say, Marco Rubio did a bill for child tax credit and paid family leave, and that leaves about 3/4 of the country that love those programs thinking, oh, Marco Rubio's on my side. And that is how the mainstream media deceives you into supporting corporate politicians.
Bingo. Well, we've got more lunatics on the way, so stick around. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about a congresswoman from Arizona who is very passionate about wanting to protect her grandchildren by shooting her grandchildren. Something she literally said when she was giving a House floor speech. We'll give you that and more coming right up.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. It appears that you guys have, and by the way, John Moore just joined. We appreciate it. Thank you for hitting the join button below if you're on YouTube. tyt.com/join. Are you gonna join for Anna's birthday? I'm not saying you should.
Don't do that.
I'm not saying it.
Don't use my
No one said it. No one said it. Okay, yet it's out there now. Okay. You guys are very nice for the super chats and everything else for Anna's birthday. You're wonderful.
Yes,
thank you guys.
thank you.
All right, Casper.
Let's get to our next story.
5 grandchildren. I would do anything to protect my 5 grandchildren, including, as a last resort, shooting them if I had to protect the lives of my grandchildren.
You heard that correctly. That was Arizona Congresswoman Debbie Lesko, who just said that she would shoot her own grandchildren to keep them safe. So she was on the House floor resisting literally the most benign gun control legislation you can imagine, the same gun control legislation that was approved in the Senate with the help of Republican lawmakers. So as you can imagine, super benign. But Debbie Lesko is fired up about red flag laws that would prevent people with severe mental health issues from purchasing weapons that can kill the rest of us. I'll get to that in just a moment, but first, it's interesting that when she responded to the backlash to her statement, she didn't just simply say, "Oh my God, I misspoke," which, watching that, I thought, it happens. Sometimes when you're speaking off the cuff on this show, I'll misspeak, I'll say something without realizing I said the wrong thing, right? But she didn't clarify that. She says via Twitter, "It never ceases to amaze me the lengths gun control zealots will go." Zealots is a fascinating word in this context.
Yeah.
"They turned my speech about protecting Second Amendment rights and my right to protect my grandchildren from violent criminals into a claim I would harm my own grandchildren. Absolutely ridiculous." So Jake, before I go to you, I just want to play that cold open again. Let's play it one more time and let's listen carefully because maybe we misunderstood what she was saying.
I have 5 grandchildren. I would do anything to protect my 5 grandchildren, including, as a last resort, shooting them if I had to protect the lives of my grandchildren.
You seem pretty clear, including as a last resort. I think she said what she said.
Yeah. So look, I don't know if she meant it or if it was a slip up, but there's a couple of things that are very relevant in this story. Number one, in the old days, everybody would have known that that was a slip up, that she didn't want to actually shoot her own grandchildren because that's nuts. These days, we're at a minimum, we're not sure.
Not sure.
And so that tells you all you need to know about the current state of the Republican Party, where we think that's a very realistic possibility. Now then, she made it worse with her explanation.
Right.
Like, wait, if you misspoke, why didn't you just say you misspoke?
Because maybe she didn't misspeak.
Yeah, and so that's so weird.
Oh, we love using our guns. We love it under any circumstance, even under the false premise that we're protecting others. We love it. I think it's very likely that she meant it. Like, I would have immediately gone on Twitter and said, "Oh my God, I totally misspoke. Didn't realize I said that at the time. Obviously, I didn't mean that." That's not what she said.
Yeah, and by the way, you could be over the top with that too. You could be like, "Look at these unbelievable zealots. Obviously, I meant protect them and shoot the criminal.
Right.
And look at how they're purposely misinterpreting a gaffe or a slip up, right?" And everybody would let it go. "Oh, she slipped up. Oh, phew," right? We would never do that story. We'd be like, "Oh, slipping up on air. We've done that 1,000 times, right?" But she doesn't say that it's a slip up.
Nope.
And so then what? I don't know the right-wing mind. It's a scary, scary place.
It really is.
But like, is there some chance that remember, these are the same folks that said in Vietnam, we had to burn down the village to save the village. So like, do they think that that's like some sort of Masada moment or something where like, hey, the criminals are in the house and they're fantasies and there's 20 of them because you're so important and they busted in and the only way to save your grandchildren is to murder them? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know what she, like, I would have liked a little more clarity. And like, if you're gonna double down, then double down. What is this half measure, right? Where you're just going after the people who just want to ensure that we do what we can legislatively to prevent bad people from getting their hands on guns so easily. But she has a problem with that.
And by the way, if you were just saying I would shoot criminals who were going to kill my grandchildren, we would agree with you.
Right.
We would agree with you. It's not a controversial statement, right? So what is wrong with you?
Well, a lot of things, including what she's about to say in this next clip. I went into the rest of her speech and she's just insane. So let's watch.
Democrat bills that we've heard this week want to take away my right to protect my grandchildren. They want to take away the rights of law-abiding citizens to protect their own children and grandchildren and wives and brothers and sisters. This bill takes away due process from law-abiding citizens. Can you imagine if you had a disgruntled ex or somebody who hates you because of your political views, and they go to a judge and say, oh, this person is dangerous. And that judge would take away your guns, lean on the side of conservatism, take away the guns, without that person even having a knowledge that there was a court hearing that would take away their guns. This is wrong.
So that's not how red flag laws work. I'm sure anyone paying attention already knows that. And she referred to the legislation as Democrat legislation, which is a funny way of referring to it because it passed in the Senate 64 to 34. Remember, there's only 50 Democratic senators. So this means that not only did they clear the legislative filibuster by getting 10 Republicans to vote in favor of it, they cleared the filibuster by getting 14 Republicans to vote for it. What does that mean, Cenk? That means that the legislation is what, strong?
No, it's the weakest legislation you could possibly imagine.
Super weak. In fact, it doesn't implement federal red flag laws. It doesn't, which you have, like, right-wingers need to make up their minds, okay? Because on one hand, after this disgusting creep, Robert Crimo, opened fire in Highland Park, Illinois, I kept hearing from all these right-wingers like, why didn't anybody report him? Oh, he was in plain sight talking about what he was gonna do. Why didn't anybody report him? Why didn't anyone report him? Well, how did he get his hands on those guns? Especially since cops showed up to his house on 2 different occasions. One time because he was gonna commit suicide, the other time because he was threatening to kill everyone in the house with the weapons he had in his room. Why did they sell him guns? Yeah, why did they sell him guns? Seems like you want red flag laws, right? But then when there's a process to formalize it through legislation, which is what you would need for it to work, they freak out about it. They freak out about it because their NRA buddies, their weapons manufacturer buddies, tell them to sit down, know your role. You need to continue advocating for the loosest gun laws imaginable so we can all be terrorized by mass shootings on literally a daily basis. That's really what's going on. But let's talk about what the legislation indicates in regard to red flag laws. No federal red flag law would be implemented. It's just providing funding for some of the states, particularly blue states, let's keep it real, that are trying to get red flag laws up and running, because you need funding for that. You need to streamline the process. Lawmakers in the Senate agreed to allow states access to federal funds either to implement red flag laws or support what Senator Cornyn described as crisis intervention programs, including programs related to mental health courts, drug courts, and veterans courts. You know what happens in courts? You need to prove your case. You don't just go in there and say, yo, I don't like this person, can you take their guns away? That's not how it works, and she knows it. Current law, by the way, she mentioned an abusive ex, right? There is a provision in the legislation that deals with a loophole in regard to abusive partners. Current law only bars domestic abusers who have been married to or lived with the victim or have had a child with them from buying a firearm. Now, lawmakers expanded the definition to include a current or recent former dating relationship with the victim, though the change cannot be applied retroactively. So again, super weak because it won't be applied retroactively. If you were super abusive in the near past, the law wouldn't affect you, but it closes the boyfriend loophole to ensure that abusive guys don't get their hands on these guns.
So look, first of all, Republicans live in the post-truth world, so she doesn't care that what she's saying is not true or legal, and neither do our voters. They would rather be lied to. That's and their emotions. Oh, don't take my guns. Which leads to the second point. It is indisputable that for Republicans, taking away guns from the mentally ill who have threatened people's lives is a worse crime than those people committing a massacre where dozens of people are shot or killed. No, that's just a fact. Because you say, look, if we do the red flag laws nationwide, Yes, we will take away the guns of some mentally ill folks who said, I'm going to kill people, right? But in return, we would stop a great number of massacres. And they go, no, we would rather have the massacres. Fact. That is an indisputable fact. Every Republican politician just said, I will not do a national red flag law. No, it's more important that the mentally ill who are dangerous and say they will murder people have access to guns. It's more important. So that's the state of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
They've lost their goddamn minds. The massacres are not accidents. She's speaking after the massacre.
Yeah.
She's saying, I'd rather have the mentally ill have. And
So
you
which
have
one
an
is it?
ex-boyfriend or an ex-husband that threatened to murder you, that has a gun, that talks about murdering you. Nope, his Second Amendment rights are more important than you getting murdered.
So, and which one is it? Because every time there's a mass shooting, the right wing wants to deflect to avoid talking about gun legislation, and instead they want to focus on mental health issues in the country. Okay, so you want to continue allowing people with severe mental health issues that could lead to them using a lethal weapon to kill a mass group of people. You want to allow that system to continue. So why do you pretend like you're concerned about the mental health aspect of this? They're not. They've never been concerned about the mental health aspect of this. Every other country has individuals with mental health issues. Every other country. The United States stands out because we're the ones who raise our hands and say, we want to give them guns, easy access to whatever guns, whatever high capacity magazines they want. Why not?
Yeah, no, Anna, I just figured out as we were doing the story, part of the reason they don't want guns taken away from the mentally ill is because they might be mentally ill. I'm not kidding. I mean, you see the Lauren Boebert, Christmas card where she's arming everyone in the family, including tiny little kids. You see this Lesko saying, "I might murder my grandchildren to save them." And then the founder of Dilbert, the guy who writes that comic strip, Scott Adams. Thank you. Just yesterday did a Twitter thread where he's like, "Oh, if you've got a son in a tough situation, you're only like this. Your only two solutions are let him die or murder him yourself." And he's huge on the right. They think that he's awesome. Oh, look, we got a celebrity on our side. And he says that, and he insists absolutely those are your only two options if your son's going through a drug problem or they're 14 to 19 years old, as he explained, and you can't get them under control. He thinks murdering your own son is a super legitimate option. So of course he doesn't want his gun taken away just in case he wants to murder his son.
Pro-life. Right wing.
And this is the pro-life family.
Yeah.
Party. Guys, we live in a country where one side has lost its goddamn mind. It is super scary times.
Well, Senator Ron Johnson is one of those lunatics, and when we come back from the break, we'll tell you about the political ad he was planning to air until there was yet another mass shooting, and then he decided to pull it. What did the ad say? We've got that and more coming right up.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Look, I don't know if all these folks are joining because of Anna's birthday, and I don't know that that's the thing you should do. I'm just saying. Okay, Ace Brawler 801, Jen Price, Fortnite Pro, the crucial one, Pamela Arnold, Mick Mitt. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Hit the join button below on YouTube. It's so easy. Everybody else, tyt.com/join. And thank you for all the super chats for Anna's birthday too. We appreciate it. Casper.
Let's do it.
The latest mass murder in America didn't involve guns. 53 people, including 5 children, were murdered by human traffickers because Joe Biden's open border policy is facilitating the multi-billion-dollar business model of some of the most evil people on the planet. Human, sex, and drug trafficking are out of control because of Democrat governance. They have to be stopped. I'm Ron Johnson, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Ron Johnson for Senate, Inc.
You might be wondering why we would play a political ad for the re-election campaign of Senator Ron Johnson, a right-winger who wants to downplay gun violence and mass shootings in this country to essentially deflect and focus on other issues. well, we're playing it because it was a political ad he was planning on using on radio very close to the time that the mass shooting took place in Highland Park, Illinois, where 7 people were gunned down by a 22-year-old lunatic. Now, we know about this because Ken Klippenstein over at The Intercept, friend of the show, Kenny Clips, does great reporting, check him out, was contacted by someone who was privy to what was going on behind the scenes with this ad, and we have the details. So Ken Klippenstein obtained the following email correspondences from Katz Radio Group, which is one of the companies that produced Johnson's ill-timed campaign ad. In an email bearing the subject line, urgent, Ron Johnson orders, a vice president of sales at Katz Radio Group wrote, quote, they need the creative pulled ASAP. If you listen to the spot, it talks about mass shootings, which obviously is not good creative after the past weekend, especially in Chicago, end quote. A day later, on July 6th, a sales assistant at Cumulus radio station group told colleagues in an email, quote, the rep for the Ron Johnson orders we entered yesterday is asking we pull the creative ASAP because of the nature of the message and how it's a little too close to the mass shooting events over the weekend. And of course, that shooting took place during a 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Illinois. So, Cenk, it's amazing to me because I'm actually shocked that Ron Johnson's team wanted to pull the ad.
Yeah.
There's a mass shooting like every day in this country. Some of them make news, others don't. Yeah.
So 2 things about that ad. One is it's very poor planning because he's trying to reference, of course, 50 folks that died in that truck that had crossed the border. And they prepared it saying that's not gun violence in terms of the last mass deaths. But how could you not know that there was going to be another gun massacre by the time you produced the ad? You'll never make a week in America without a massacre by guns. So that like when if somebody showed me that ad on a campaign, I'd be like, this is going to take like 2 weeks to put together. There's no way we'll make it. There'll be a gun shooting well before that. There'll be 2 or 3 gun shootings before that,
yeah,
right?
100%.
So terrible planning. And then the second thing is if you actually listen to the ad, look at what he's doing. It's very subtle, but it's meant to, well, maybe it's not that subtle. It's meant to appeal to the QAnon crazies. Because it takes a story that actually happened. Those immigrants did die and it was terrible, right? And there should be accountability for it. And by the way, you could blame Biden's border issues, et cetera. That's within the normal, legitimate debate. I don't really agree, but that's okay, right?
No, I definitely don't agree, and I'll get into that in a moment.
Right, but he's not doing that. What he's doing extra on top is he randomly mentions sex trafficking, but that story had nothing to do with sex trafficking. And he talks about this, people profiting off of a multi-billion-dollar organization. What does that have to do with this story? It makes it seem like there's these elites who are profiting off of sex trafficking.
That's right.
And it's the Democrats that are allowing it, et cetera. And QAnon's eating that up, right? Because that's the Republican base now.
Yeah, they love to provide red meat for the craziest elements of their party, of their base. And that's what he was doing there. So for those of you who might have missed that story, it involved human smugglers who had smuggled in around 100 migrants in the back of a truck that was not in any way refrigerated or air conditioned. They were not given water. In fact, the smugglers had covered the floor of the truck with chicken bouillon in order to mask the smell of bodies that would potentially, bodies of dead people. Right, because they knew that, they're gonna be in the back of this truck in the sweltering heat with no air conditioning, no water. The driver of that truck abandoned it later, and authorities found it. And I think the death toll, the last time I checked, was up to 57. 57 of those 100 people had died. And I do want to just quickly address what Ron Johnson is saying about the tragedy in that story. It is tragic. It's tragic that under Republican pressure to essentially shut down our borders, shut down any legal means to seek asylum into the United States, people who are fleeing their own countries in desperation for safety are placed into the hands of these human smugglers who couldn't care about their lives at all, right? And so you're the problem, Ron Johnson. You're the problem. When you do away with legal means for migrants to get legal status into the United States, this is what happens. You don't want to give them their day in court. You don't want to give them an opportunity to make their case before a judge and to make an argument that Biden has an open border policy. Yeah, totally. That's how things work. When there's an open border, the first thing migrants do is hit up those smugglers who couldn't care less about their lives.
No,
So
it's such a
stupid.
great point, and it's so simple, but yet, again, our media is such a failure. If it's an open border, why did they have to smuggle them in? That's it, we're done with it. But every Republican in the country believes it's an open border.
They do, they all believe it. Let's go to graphic 5 here. PolitiFact looked into this as well. PolitiFact fact-checked an open border claim in December and found most people trying to cross the border were turned away because of Title 42, which was implemented under Trump and it continued under Biden. Although the administration exempted children who arrived alone and some families, not because the Biden administration wanted to, it's because a federal judge forced the Biden administration to make that exception. So let's be clear about that, for the kids.
Otherwise, he would have agreed with Trump 100%.
100%.
And by the way, did he get any credit for that? So he's following Trump's policy completely. And no, the right wing still says it's an open border. That's why people had to die getting smuggled in through an open border. And literally every Republican voter in the country believes it.
Right.
Because the Democrats are losers, can't make their case if their life depends. I mean, look at how easily we made the case. Why can't Biden do that? Why is he so incompetent?
He's napping, homeboy's napping.
Total, utter incompetence. The media is so scared of the right wing, they'll never tell you the truth. They'll never say, hey, Ron Johnson, liar. Why are you calling it an open border in your ad when obviously they were getting smuggled in because it's not an open border? Why are you saying that Biden's policies are so different than Trump's when they're nearly identical? Progressives are mad at Biden because his immigration policies are nearly identical to Trump. Why don't you just actually say the truth for once in your life? But the press will never do that to a Republican politician because the Republican politicians are gods to them.
And final thing that I have to mention, because I got the number wrong and I want to make sure you guys have the right information. 57 people did not die. The number is very close though. 53 of those migrants died in the back of that truck. So I wanted to clarify that. Finally, why is Ron Johnson so desperate to deflect from the very real issue we have in this country with gun violence and the terror that people are facing as a result of that? Well, Johnson has been a stalwart opponent of gun control throughout his career, having received about 1.2 million in both direct and indirect contributions from pro-gun groups since his first campaign in 2010. See, this is the difference between corporate media coverage and what you'll get from sources like The Intercept with amazing reporters like Ken Klippenstein. This is what matters. What's actually incentivizing what we're seeing among these disgusting, disgraceful politicians? It's always the money. It's always their self-interest and their never-ending, efforts to remain in power and accumulate money for themselves, enrich themselves. From March of 2020 to February of 2022, 1.7 million expulsions have been carried out under Title 42, with 1.2 million of them occurring under the Biden administration, according to the Migration Policy Institute report on government data. So I wanted to make sure you guys knew about that as well, as the right wing continues fear-mongering about a so-called open border policy. Final thing that I'll add about this, Ron Johnson is just one of many Republicans who uses the issue of human trafficking, sex trafficking as a deflection from our failed gun policies, right? Listen, I think that we should be worried about child sex trafficking and human trafficking. What are you gonna do about it? What is your solution, Ron Johnson? Or are you just using it in a campaign ad to deflect from gun violence? They don't care about any of these issues. People are getting raped in our prisons every hour of every day. They don't care. They don't care.
No.
Women are getting raped all across the country, and these red states have a massive backlog of untested rape kits. Please spare me your faux concern about rape and child sex trafficking or any of that. You guys are the ones advocating for 10-year-olds who have been raped and got impregnated through that rape to be forced to have their rapist baby. What are you talking about? You guys are terrorists. That's what they are. They terrorize all of us through their policies, through their lies, through validating the most violent people in the country. That's who Ron Johnson is. That's what the Republican Party is. Don't get it twisted.
You know, we should do a trigger warning for Republicans whenever we're gonna state facts. Like when we give the facts on immigration and guns, we should be like, trigger warning, that we're about to show you facts. I know you don't care about them, and it'll really upset your feelings. So last things for me are mainstream media, as always, sucks. You should never write an article about Ron Johnson and his policies on guns without mentioning that he got $1.2 million in bribes. How can you be a reporter and say that's not at all relevant? I'm not gonna state it in the article because I don't think it's relevant that he got $1.2 million because he's such an angel. Because Ron Johnson is such an angel, he would never be affected by $1.2 million. No one believes that. Even the right wing doesn't believe that. The only people stupid enough to believe that are the reporters in Washington.
All right, well, let's take our first hour break. When we come back for the second hour, we've got a lot more news to get to, including the fact that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has stepped down, he has resigned. What does that mean? And then we'll lighten things up a little later in the show, I think. So stick around, we'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.